Huge breaking news out of Homestead, Florida. Danica Patrick will end her professional racing career at the 2018 102nd running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Now, there is not a team or sponsor announcement at the moment, but what we do know is that Danica Patrick will participate in some form, at least attempt to qualify for the race. I think she will probably qualify with no problems, considering all the engine deals where usually there will only be about 33 to 34 entries. So assuming she's not the 34th slowest person, she will be able to make the field fairly easily. However, this has some huge implications in terms of the motor racing landscape for next year. Now, Danica Patrick will also participate in the 2018 edition of the Daytona 500. Then she'll go on to Indy and call it a professional racing career. Obviously, she is, at the moment, a full-time NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series driver, but as Eric Almirola has moved to the number 10 Stewart-Haas racing car, as Danica Patrick's sponsorship dollars have dried up, it makes you wonder, or it made pretty much everybody wonder, if this was it, and we had the confirmation today that it was it for her full-time professional driving career, and then she'll just have these two races at the end of, or at the beginning of 2018, and then presumably she will be done. Now, there's a lot of talk, again, about teams and sponsors. There's a lot of speculation out there. Some of it, I would say, has a good shot of happening, and some of it doesn't. I'll tell you some of the speculation that's kind of running about at the moment, and then I'll tell you what I think actually is going to happen. So a lot of people have been pointing to her running the Indianapolis 500 for Andretti Autosport. I feel this is a bit unlikely, seeing as there are already 5 drivers spoken for at Andretti Autosport, and that's not counting the possibility that McLaren will end up doing something with or without Fernando Alonso, by the way, with Andretti in the 2018 edition of the race. That has been talked about, so potentially you've already got 6 entries spoken for at the Andretti Autosport stable. Adding a 7th would be very unlikely unless Danica is in with the McLaren operation, which I would be very skeptical to. People talking about the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500, well, there's only 2 teams that participate in both races at the moment. That being Team Penske, which I would find very unlikely, while not outside of the realm of possibility that she could theoretically do both races for the same team at Penske. The speculation seems more likely leaning towards her being in a Ganassi entry for both races. Now, while I will say this is a pretty likely scenario, considering that Ganassi has open seats because NASCAR limits teams to 4 entries per season per race. So Ganassi obviously only has 2 drivers at the moment with Kyle Larson and Jamie McMurray. It's tough for me to think. And they also only have 2 in the IndyCars at the moment with Scott Dixon and Ed Jones. So there is a possibility that Ganassi could add a 3rd car for both the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500 for Danica. Now, the problem I find in this is, adding Danica to especially the Indy 500 program would be a bit of a distraction, and it would kind of go in the opposite direction of where Ganassi has been kind of taking the team recently, in that it's very focused on 2 super drivers. Now, there's always the possibility, and I have speculated this, and in fact I kind of implied it in my silly season IndyCar Red Pill, is that I thought a 3rd car will be made available at the Indianapolis 500 for Kyle Larson. Now, would they do a program like that for Danica? Who knows? It's certainly a possibility. If Danica was to stick with the same team for both races, I would definitely say Ganassi is the only option, even though Penske could theoretically field the 5th car. They did it last year. I feel it highly unlikely, especially because of the fact that Roger Penske told Juan Pablo Montoya he will not have an Indy 500 ride with Penske next year. So actually, that's another thing. That's another domino to fall, where Juan Pablo Montoya will be at the Indy 500. A lot of people are saying Sam Schmidt Racing, by the way. But we're not talking about Juan Pablo Montoya. We're talking about Danica Patrick. So where does Danica go? I think for the Daytona 500, I think you're going to end up seeing her at Roush Fenway Racing. And obviously, there's a pretty good reason for that, at least a couple reasons. Number one, Roush Fenway Racing only has 2 full-time entries in the NASCAR Cup Series. Those are fielded by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Trevor Bayne. Of course, the personal connection is that Danica Patrick is dating Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in real life. Therefore, a boyfriend-girlfriend team might help sell some sponsorship, at least for the Daytona 500, if Danica doesn't currently have the sponsorship secured. But considering her management team has announced both of these races, I would assume they have the funding more or less taken care of, and especially considering we're, 3 months from the Daytona 500 and 7 from the Indianapolis 500, there's plenty of time to get these deals done. But yeah, I think Roush Fenway Racing is the probably most likely landing spot for Danica at the Daytona 500. Those cars are fairly competitive. I think Danica will have a good run if she indeed drives for Roush Fenway Racing. She'll definitely have some support. I think Ford likes her quite a bit, as they have funded her ride or helped fund her ride in times of the sponsorship going away. So I think we'll see Danica in Roush Fenway for the Daytona 500, but where does she land for the Indianapolis 500? Well, you have to think that she started her career at the Rahal Letterman team. In the 2005 Indianapolis 500. That's where her professional career started. She had actually driven for Rahal in the Atlantic Series before then, so Danica has been a part of the Rahal family for a very long time, and I think that team will end up adding a third car for Danica at that race. Now, of course, that team already has expanded to 2 cars for the full-time season, welcoming the Indianapolis 500 champion Takuma Sato to team alongside Graham Rahal. Now, what that does is provide a very stable operation, obviously, because you've got the defending Indianapolis 500 winner and a pretty good development driver in Graham Rahal, as we saw through the Aero Kit era. He knows how to develop a new car, and obviously there's a lot of new elements on the DW12 for next year. So you've got a good development driver, and you've got a very fast driver at that team. You bring Danica in there, I think they'd be able to get her up to speed really quick. You guys got to remember, and there's a lot of people talking mad trash about Danica right now. She was a very capable open-wheel driver, specifically on the oval tracks, well above mid-pack. I mean, there's a reason she got signed at Andretti. It's not just because she could get sponsorship. Now, obviously, Danica struggles with car setup, but again, I think Rahal will be able to, and I'm speaking Graham Rahal, and his engineering team will be able to lead the charge. I mean, that's something that Takuma Sato struggles with as well, setups. So I think Graham will lead the engineering side of that thing. Takuma will be able to get the pace out of the car, and I think if Danica follows that lead, she'll be all right. Now, people have also been speculating that Andretti Autosport, like I said, was in the mix. Again, while that would be also a technical homecoming for Danica, I think it would make more sense, not only from a car count perspective, a more intimate team atmosphere at Rahal, where she could really, rely on her teammates to help her get her back up to speed in Indy cars. But again, because of the fact that there is that personal connection there, starting your career at that team, I think she's going to go to Rahal. I mean, if this is going to be her farewell tour, I could see her definitely teaming with her boyfriend at the Daytona 500 and then going back to the team that gave her her big professional break at Rahal. And again, I really want to talk real quick about Danica Patrick's skill set, because again, it's right there with what you would think a good IndyCar driver is. She's good. What she excels in is downforce and being able to pedal the car around a high-speed oval track. That was her strength in NASCAR. If you remember, she was able to take a pole position at the 2013 Daytona 500. We'll talk about the legitimacy of that, I'm sure, in the comments, but she ran up front in that race, and at several of the 1.5 mile super speedways, when NASCAR had the super high downforce package, she was quite good, running up in the top 10 a lot of times. And there's been some speculation recently about how much engineering help she actually gets from her NASCAR team in terms of setups and equipment quality. So I think the people who are saying she's going to putt around at the back are a bit mistaken, especially because of her experience. Even though, although it's a bit in the past, I think it's not going to hurt her as much as a lot of folks think it will. I think she'll be able to get up to speed relatively quickly. And you know, here's the thing. I mean, Danica Patrick. This is a big thing for the Indy 500. It's definitely going to generate a lot of headlines. It might generate some TV ratings. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Danica Patrick is a big domestic American name that a lot of people mainstream know, and especially considering it will be her final race, yeah, you're going to have a lot of people tuning in to see that. And also tuning in to the entire month of May. This is going to have a similar effect to what Fernando Alonso's entry into the 500 this year contributed, at least from a perspective of people on the grounds at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Ticket sales and whatnot. International presence obviously is not going to be nearly as big, but domestically this will probably help the race out quite a bit. I mean, it's a great thing, in my opinion, for the sport. I think it's, you know, seeing some of these big stars again. You know, a big star doesn't necessarily have to be the most successful drivers. If a person has name power, them going to some of the bigger races and running them in the same season, you know, that's a win-win for everybody. The Daytona 500 will benefit from this, and certainly the Indianapolis 500 will, because it's a unique opportunity to see a driver, even though didn't necessarily have the most significant time in terms of success rate on the track, certainly was significant in the impact that she made upon the sport. So a lot of people are going to want to see this. And again, I think she's going to be competitive a lot. You know, she's saying that she's done, you know, full stop after the 2018 Indy 500. I would honestly hold off on that prediction, even from her, because I suspect if she's, you know, real competitive at the 500, if she's a top 10 driver and she's able to mix it up at the front of the field, you know, I couldn't see a scenario where she doesn't come back in 2019 or 2020, unless she's, you know, planning on having children or something, or getting married, which is always a possibility. Apparently at the press conference she was crying, so it doesn't necessarily sound like she necessarily wants to call it quits, but you know, we'll just have to wait and see where Danica ends up going after this, because, you know, if she's competitive, especially at the Indianapolis 500, I don't see any reason that she wouldn't come back and continue to do it. But obviously, you know, we're going to be covering it big time on this channel. Indy 500 month is always a big thing on this channel. If you guys haven't been around for an Indy 500 month, it's when I completely cut off all other coverage of any other racing series and focus specifically on the Indianapolis 500. So obviously a lot of people came in because of the Alonso stuff, and I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people paying attention because of the Danica stuff. So it's going to be a very exciting 2018 month of May, and we're just kicking off a very exciting 2018 racing season. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for watching the IndyCar Red Pill, where we don't pull any punches and talk with no filter. And we will see you in the next video. Be sure to let me know down in the comments what you think of Danica Patrick coming back to IndyCar racing for one last race. And also, you know, speculate about her NASCAR future as well. It's always an exciting discussion. We'll see you in the next video.